There are nights you remember until your very last breath. For me, it all began with a plastic cup of cheap wine, string lights stretched between rooftop beams, and one look I absolutely, undeniably should have avoided. My name's Jason Miller. And until that party, my life had been going uphill like it was on rails. I was a product manager at a fast-growing tech company in San Francisco, a startup that had outgrown the promising phase and was starting to take big bites out of the market. People respected me. They came to me for advice. I led key projects, built strong teams, and honestly, even I was sometimes amazed at how I managed to survive crushing deadlines and still stay relatively sane. The CEO, Randall Cook, was complicated. On the surface, a charismatic leader. But behind the scenes, a man with a constant flicker of irritation in his eyes. I'd seen his wife, Ellie, around the office a few times. She came to company events, always polished, always poised, but she kept a careful distance. Nothing personal. Just one of those familiar faces in the background. Then came our summer party. You know the type, rented rooftop of a trendy downtown venue, low music, overpriced snacks on skewers, and small talk poured over glasses of bubbly. I was standing off to the side, already calculating how soon I could politely disappear, when I felt a light tap on my elbow. I turned. Ellie. She was smiling. "Hi, Jason," she said, like we were old friends. "Enjoying the evening?" I froze for a second, then quickly pulled myself together. A few polite comments about the music, the weather, and just like that, we were laughing at how Randall, in classic fashion, managed to mix up 3 employee names on stage. And sometimes, you don't need words to know someone's interested. The way she tilted her head. The way she held her drink between us just a bit longer than usual. The way her eyes lingered. It wasn't subtle. About 5 minutes into our conversation, Randall himself walked up. "Ellie, let's go," he said, gripping her shoulder just a little too firmly. She glanced at him, calm and almost dismissive, then shook her head slightly. "One more minute," she said gently, but with steel in her voice. I didn't know where to look. My boss's wife, showing clear interest, and my boss, visibly fuming a few feet away. Not exactly the party dynamic I'd hoped for. But Ellie didn't seem fazed. We talked about travel, old movies, how San Francisco is the kind of city that either steals your heart instantly or makes you run the other way. I laughed along, but deep down, I knew this conversation was dangerous. Randall came back a second time, this time with sharper footsteps. "Ellie. We're leaving." "One more minute," she replied, same tone, same quiet defiance. I saw his fist clench just slightly at his side. Then, without a word, he turned and walked off into the crowd. A heavy silence settled between us. Ellie gave me a small, apologetic smile. "Sorry. He can be a bit much sometimes." I didn't respond. Just took another sip of wine and nodded, as if any of this was remotely normal. Near the end of the evening, things escalated. I was by the edge of the dance floor when I heard raised voices. Randall had grabbed Ellie near the exit. His face was dark red, twisted with rage. Hers was cold, detached, like she'd flipped some internal switch and checked out entirely. I couldn't hear all the words, but I didn't need to. It was a jealousy-fueled scene, the kind that makes people look down at their shoes and pretend they're not hearing it. Clearly, this wasn't their first argument. And it sure wouldn't be the last. I left the party with a strange, lingering taste in my mouth. Like something important had cracked that night, and whether I wanted it or not, I'd witnessed it. What I didn't know then was how much that single evening was about to change everything. Something felt off that morning at the office. You know that weird sensation when you walk into a room and instantly feel like people were just talking about you. That's exactly what hit me when I stepped through the glass doors and greeted the receptionist. She usually smiled. This time, just a stiff nod. The first few hours were soaked in tension. Colleagues I used to trade jokes and memes with suddenly went dry, like Jira tickets in human form. Emails from Randall started flooding in, short, sharp, demanding. All the usual courtesy was gone, replaced by this frosty, mechanical tone. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Maybe it's just a bad day, I told myself. By lunchtime, it was obvious, it wasn't just me. Randall called me into his office. I walked in. He didn't offer me a seat. Just sat there with his hands clasped together like he was waiting to pounce. "Jason," he said, cool and clipped. "You know Project X needs to be completed ahead of schedule. New requirements from the investors. But we already agreed on the timeline," I started. "You'll make it work," he cut me off. "Or I'll find someone who can." That tone, like I'd already failed before I even left the room. My heart was pounding as I walked out. It wasn't a challenge. It was a warning. And that's when the hell began. The pressure didn't just increase, it surged. Deadlines were moved to impossible windows. Tasks came without context, and when I asked for clarification, I was accused of not understanding basic directives. Every decision I made was second-guessed in meetings. Then, suddenly, HR started compliance reviews specifically targeting my team. I tried to hold on. Some days I'd sneak into an empty conference room during lunch and lay my head on the table, whispering to myself, "Hang in there. The team needs you. Just hold." But after a brutal week and a half, we delivered. Drained. Eyes hollow. Nerves frayed from endless nights and silent tension. And that Friday evening, I got the call from HR. No small talk. Just cold, formal paperwork, termination at the employer's discretion. No, thank you. No handshake. No closure. Just a door, one I had helped build, quietly closed in my face. The first couple days, I didn't feel anything. I just existed. Sat on the couch, stared at the ceiling. Tried not to think about Ellie. Honestly, I had enough wreckage to sort through without dragging her into it. Then came the anger. Hot. Sticky. Like gasoline poured in my chest. What the hell? I yelled into the quiet. For what? I hadn't done anything wrong. No lines crossed. No scandals. And yet I was the one tossed out like garbage. I wanted revenge. I wanted to storm into the office, flip desks, scream in everyone's face. Wanted to post a public takedown on LinkedIn. Wanted to blow the whole thing up, make them feel it. But one night, sitting in the dark with a half-finished beer and nothing but silence around me, something shifted. It wasn't anger anymore. Not even hurt. It was resolve. Cold. Heavy. Final. I started remembering things. All the holes in the product. All the bugs we swept under the rug so we could ship faster than the competition. How managers routinely sweet-talked investors while the back end was crumbling. How talented people kept leaving, sick of the toxicity, while the reports still claimed we had a thriving team culture. I knew it all. From the inside. And then it hit me, my revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be methodical. I started job hunting. Not just anywhere, I wanted a company that respected people. Where leadership didn't run on fear, but on trust. And I found one. Bright Core Technologies. No hype. No nonsense. And best of all, a direct competitor to Randall's company. The interview was a breeze. They were looking for someone who knew the market, understood product pain points, and could move fast without breaking people. Perfect. I got the offer. But this was only the beginning. Just working wasn't enough. I was going to make an impact. I worked harder than ever in those first few weeks. I dug up insights no one else had noticed. Suggested product changes that cut through the clutter and spoke to what customers actually needed. And most of all, I knew exactly where my old company was vulnerable. And then I started writing. Anonymously. On Medium. The Dark Side of Startup Culture. That was the title of my first blog post as Gray Coder. No names. Just stories. But everyone in the valley knew who I was talking about. It caught fire overnight. While I was building something new, something better, over in those sleek glass offices I'd once called home, the cracks started spreading. And I knew, this was just the beginning. Sometimes you don't need cannons to bring down a fortress. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet tunnel under the walls. Those first months at Brightcore felt like a breath of fresh air. People actually cared about their work. Processes were transparent. Mistakes weren't punished with public executions, they were reviewed at retros with honesty and context. I gave it my all. Not out of fear, but because, for the first time in a long time, I wanted to win again. But deep down, I was working on something else too. Something slower. Quieter. Built for the long game. I started piecing together the puzzle. I remembered all the bugs that were swept under the rug at my old company. All the vulnerabilities they pretended didn't exist just to preserve a pretty image for investors. All the internal rot hidden beneath the banner of fastest growing startup of the year. And most importantly, I knew they were planning to launch a new product in 3 months. Unfinished features. Barely secured servers. Vague documentation. Everything I hadn't been allowed to fix was now a noose around their neck. That's when I knew it was time to act. I created a Medium account under the alias Grey Coder and published my first post, The Hidden Cost of Startups, When Speed Matters More Than Quality. No names. Just facts. Situations painfully familiar to anyone who had worked in our industry. The post blew up overnight. Thousands of views in a day. Comments poured in, same thing happened at our place, guess the company in 3 tries. Reading this felt like looking at my own office. I sat at home in the dark, coffee mug in hand, watching the numbers rise. And what I felt wasn't joy. Or revenge. It was justice. Quiet. Deep. Real. My next move was riskier. I gathered a folder of documents, old emails, internal reports, screenshots of unresolved bugs, HR threads about covering up incidents. And I sent it all to a journalist I knew from Tech Radar. Nate Davis. A veteran of the tech beat, known for digging deep and protecting his sources. A week later, the article dropped, When Success Costs Too Much, Inside the Culture of a Startup on the Brink. The company wasn't named outright. But to those in the know, the mask was off. Meanwhile, at Bright Core, we were heads down building something better. When our MVP hit the market, it wasn't just good. It was better. Faster. Safer. And, most satisfying of all, it directly addressed the pain points Randall's company had never bothered to fix. And I started seeing the shift. Clients were asking questions. Old partners started shopping for alternatives. Investors. They began combing through financials. Then something happened I'll never forget. One evening, a message popped into my LinkedIn inbox. From a former coworker. Then another. And another. Thank you, Jason. You gave us room to breathe. We read your words. We understand. We're done putting up with it. I'm leaving too. I finally found a place where people are treated like people. I sat in the half-dark of my apartment, cold rain tapping the windows, watching those tiny message bubbles light up one after the other. And for the first time in months, I truly smiled. Not with the gloating grin of someone who got even. But with the quiet, steady smile of someone who finally did something right. I knew it wasn't over. Randall was a scrapper. He wouldn't go down without a fight. But the cracks had started. And if a single drop could fracture stone, then maybe, just maybe, it had all been worth it. In the meantime, I started sleeping again. Deep. Peaceful. No nightmares about missed deadlines. No Monday morning dread. No looming fear that I'd be thrown out with the trash tomorrow. I fell asleep with a feeling I hadn't known in years. This was only the beginning. Sometimes life throws surprises at you when you least expect them. Just when I thought I'd turned that page, the past came walking back in. It happened at a tech conference in San Francisco. One of those massive summits, thousands of people, business suits, shiny product booths, the scent of fresh coffee, and that familiar nervous energy in the air. I was standing near our company's booth, chatting with investors, when I caught a glimpse of someone familiar. Ellie. She was walking between the rows of exhibitors, wrapped in a light beige coat, her shoulders moving with that same effortless grace I couldn't forget. My heart did a full somersault. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Pretend I hadn't seen her. Walk away. Say hello. But she made the decision for me. She saw me. Paused for half a second. Then started walking toward me. "Hi, Jason," she said when she stopped just a few steps away. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. Not the playful tone I remembered. "Hi, Ellie," I replied, feeling something long buried tighten in my chest. A pause settled between us. People bustled around us, laughing, networking, shaking hands. But we stood still, like the two of us were trapped in a bubble of silence. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. I nodded. We stepped off to a quiet hallway on the side. She began, then hesitated. "I've been meaning to talk to you. I found out what happened after that night." I stayed quiet. Let her speak. "I want to apologize," she continued. "For everything. For putting you in that position. For not stopping Randall when I should have." She looked down, pulling her sleeves over her hands. "We were already on the edge," she said softly. "And you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." I nodded. What could I say? She wasn't my enemy. Then she looked up, those same warm brown eyes I remembered. But they weren't playful anymore. They were tired. And free. "We got divorced," Ellie said. My eyebrows lifted. "I couldn't take it anymore," she said with a faint, joyless laugh. There was no bitterness in her voice. Only relief, the kind you hear from someone who's finally crawled out of a cage. "I held on for a long time," she said. "Tried to fight. Then just existed. And then one day I realized nothing was going to change." "You want to know the worst part?" I looked at her, still silent. "He destroyed it all himself," she said, almost whispering. "The family, the business, everything. He just couldn't admit it. Easier to blame everyone else. Me. You." Her voice trembled slightly. "I'm really sorry you got caught in that storm." I shrugged gently. "It's okay," I said quietly. "Honestly. I'm exactly where I want to be now." Ellie studied me for a moment. And in her eyes, I saw something I'd tried to ignore for months. Something warm. Something human. We exchanged numbers a little awkwardly. Like old friends who weren't sure if the line between them still existed. A few days later, she texted me. We met for coffee. Then dinner. At first, we talked carefully, like we were walking on thin ice. The weather. New projects. Books we'd read lately. But over time, the conversations deepened. We talked about fear. About dreams. About how easy it is to lose yourself in other people's expectations. I didn't fall back in love with Ellie. I discovered her again. Not as my boss's wife. Not as the woman from the rooftop party. But as a person. Someone who had lived through a storm, and refused to let it break her. We started seeing each other regularly. Long walks by the waterfront. Quiet cafes. Conversations that went from old movies to half-serious vacation plans. And sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with a calmness I hadn't seen in anyone in years. One Sunday evening, as the sun slipped lazily toward the horizon, we were sitting by the pool at her house just outside the city. Champagne cracked softly in our glasses. The pool glowed golden in the fading light. She rested her head on my shoulder. And everything just settled. No questions. No fears. No ghosts from the past. I looked at the water and realized something. I hadn't wanted revenge. I'd wanted freedom. And now, I had it. Meanwhile, the news from my old company kept trickling in. One former coworker messaged to say he'd left. Another told me about a failed deal. Rumors were spreading, Randall was struggling. The team was falling apart. Investors were restless. I didn't gloat. Didn't feel satisfaction. I just saw it for what it was. If you bury the truth for long enough, it eventually claws its way out. One evening, scrolling headlines, I saw it. Brightworks announces CEO replacement amid internal crisis. I clicked the article. Yes. It was them. My old home. Randall had been officially removed as CEO. I leaned back on the couch, glass in hand, and just let out a long breath. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Just closure. Ellie stepped onto the patio with 2 fresh glasses. "What are we drinking to?" she asked, sitting beside me. I smiled. "To new beginnings," I said. She nodded. And our glasses clinked gently in the golden light of the setting sun. There's a strange rule in life: if you hold back long enough, reality ends up doing the very thing you were too afraid to do yourself. News of Randall's company falling apart didn't come all at once. First, they lost a major client. Then the CTO resigned. A month later, a failed deal with investors. I watched it happen from a distance, though I knew that machine inside out. I used to be a gear in it, after all. But now it was breaking down without me. Old colleagues started leaving, in waves. Some of them came straight to Brightcore. They showed up with tired eyes, worn-down voices, and one common line: "We couldn't stay there anymore." I nodded. Understood. No explanations needed. One of the last to join us was Alex, our former DevOps engineer. We met for lunch. He kept his eyes low. "You know," he said quietly. "At the company, they said it all started falling apart because of you. That you were the rot. That you infected the system." I chuckled. "Alex," I said, "if a system is rotting from the inside, the one who flips on the light isn't the problem." He smiled, for the first time all meal. One evening, I got an email. No subject. No signature. Just a single line in my inbox: "Sender, Randall Cook." I clicked it open. "You think you've won? You just laid low. Coward. I built that damn company from scratch. And you're a leech hiding behind other people. You have nothing. You're nothing. You're a traitor." That was it. I stared at the screen, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No pain. Not even the urge to reply. I simply closed the email. Took a breath. Opened my photo gallery. There it was, a shot of me and Ellie by the pool. Barefoot, laughing, champagne in hand. Her hair catching the sun, her smile calm and real. I selected the photo. Tapped share. Typed in Randall's email address. And below it, I wrote, "You chose how your story ends." Then I hit send. Not for revenge. Not for a reaction. Just to put the final period at the end of that chapter. 3 days passed. No reply. And honestly, that was even better than another one of his tantrums. A week later, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years, a guy from the VC fund that once backed Randall's company. "I heard you picked up a couple major clients," he said. "Word is, your product's the one people are watching now. Congrats. You did it." I thanked him, hung up, and stepped outside. The sunlight filtered through the leaves. A soft breeze moved through my shirt. Everything I needed was ahead of me. Ellie and I had started renting a house just outside the city. Not forever, just for the summer. Some nights we didn't talk at all. We'd just sit on the porch and watch the day disappear. And that silence said more than 1,000 standing ovations ever could. At some point, a thought occurred to me: the most important thing in life isn't what you build. It's how you leave when it all falls apart. And who's still beside you when the dust settles. When I got fired, I wanted to burn everything. Destroy. Expose. Erase. But now I knew, revenge is smoke. But creation is air. You don't see it. But it's what keeps you alive. Ellie walked over with 2 mugs of coffee. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I'm finally home."